From petty drug dealer to an Olympic gold medalist and a two-time unified world champion, selling out 90,000-seater stadiums and reviving British boxing, Anthony Joshua has become one of the biggest stars we have ever seen in the sport. Now heading into an all-British showdown with Daniel Dubois, where AJ bids to become a three-time world champion, I wanted to look back at AJ's career to see how we got here and ask the ultimate question: how good is Anthony Joshua actually? Anthony Joshua was born in 1989 in Watford, England. He started the sport late, picking up a pair of boxing gloves at the age of 18. He joined his local boxing club, Finchley ABC, which was the same club as longtime friend Derek Chisora. AJ, much like Deontay Wilder, had a very fast rise in the amateur scene, as in 2011, at the World Amateur Boxing Championships, AJ would manage to win a silver medal. When AJ was younger, he got himself into some petty crime, and his past life would come to haunt him when it looked like AJ could face prison time for a drugs conviction. However, he managed to avoid a sentence, and Team GB would allow AJ to be in the setup. AJ would reach the very top of the amateur game when he controversially won an Olympic gold medal in the London Olympics. I say controversially, as there were multiple fights that many would say AJ lost. The first controversy would be against the excellent Cuban fighter Erislandy Savon, which, side note, was a real shame he never turned pro as he was a serious talent, but I assume it was due to the ban of professional boxing in Cuba, which has famously stopped some tremendous talents from becoming world champion. Anyway, Savon quite clearly won and should have taken the win. Then we come to the next controversy, which was in the final where AJ would take on Italian fighter Roberto Camarelli. Now, this wasn't a Roy Jones Jr. type Olympic robbery, I would just say it's a very close fight. So yes, overall, AJ probably shouldn't be an Olympic gold medalist, but that's not to say he wasn't a fantastic amateur fighter. AJ would turn his attention to the pro game turning over in 2013, with every promoter in Britain clamouring to sign him. It would be Matchroom Sport who would ultimately land the signature, with then relatively unknown Eddie Hearn, or Barry Hearn's son as he was known then, who'd be the man leading AJ's promotional campaign. With the juggernaut of Sky Sports behind him, it wouldn't take long for AJ to become a household name in the UK. AJ would make his debut on the 5th of October 2013 at the O2, facing Italian fighter Emanuele Leao, who he would beat with ease with a KO in the first round. The Joshua hype train was just getting started. An Olympic gold medalist with a likeable personality and is built like a Greek statue, managed to cross over to mainstream appeal. Now, much like the rise of Conor McGregor in MMA, who he personally brought so many new fans to the sport, AJ is directly responsible for a lot of new fans in boxing. Joshua would follow up his debut by stopping his next 7 opponents without going past the 3rd round, beating journeyman and domestic level fighters, but doing it in style. AJ showed solid hand speed, especially for his size. He had coordination and balance that fighters of similar sizes didn't. Now, not everybody at the time was convinced, however, with some comparing AJ to fellow countryman Audley Harrison, which, in my opinion, fans were only comparing them based on them both being British and gold medalists, and nothing more. Like comparing me to Henry Cavill because I'm a man, and that's it. AJ would get his first title when he fought Russian fighter Denis Bakhtov for a WBC International Heavyweight title. AJ would treat Bakhtov like a heavy bag. He had very little to think about, as Bakhtov was fighting very negatively, not coming forward and not making AJ work for the win, and the fight was stopped in round 2. AJ would go on to KO his next 3 opponents before the first intriguing fight of his pro career when he took on American heavyweight Kevin Johnson. Despite all the trash talk from Kevin Johnson, AJ would make light work of him, dropping him heavily in round 1, and unlucky for Johnson, the fight would continue into round 2, where AJ would continue to punish him, showcasing his fantastic punching ability and fast hands. He would finish Johnson in round 2. AJ would then take on part-time Scottish boxer Gary Cornish for the vacant Commonwealth title, beating Cornish with utter ease, stopping him in round 1. In 2015, AJ would get his first chance at fighting for the prestigious British title, his opponent a very familiar face, a man he faced in the amateurs all the way back in 2009. Dillian the Body Snatcher White, a man who had beaten AJ in their amateur fight, even dropping him. For context, that was White's first ever amateur fight and only Joshua's third. They were both extremely raw talents, and of course, they've changed drastically as fighters since then. Well, you'd hope so anyway. One of the best things about British boxing over the years is the rivalries, whether it's Nigel Benn versus Chris Eubank, Carl Froch versus George Groves, David Haye versus Tony Bellew. We've been blessed with some great ones over the years, and this was no exception. The fight more than delivered, both inside and outside the ring. The fight was one of them where tactics were essentially thrown out the window in favour of a shootout. AJ would begin the fight very aggressively, however White would trouble AJ early with his signature left hook in round 2, which almost had AJ out on his feet, which was the first time AJ had been in real trouble in his pro career. However, AJ remained calm and managed to weather the storm. White would visually tire in the 5th round and AJ would take advantage. As in round 7, AJ would unleash a barrage of punches with a huge uppercut which dropped White heavily and he was unable to recover. AJ would now become the British champion, handing White his first career loss. What he showed in there was that he could come through adversity. He showed a lot of heart, and overall it was a solid test for AJ at this stage of his career. In April of 2016, AJ would be challenging for world title honours when he faced newly crowned IBF heavyweight champion Charles Martin. Now let's address the elephant in the room here. Charles Martin was a very poor champion. He won a vacated belt following the departure of Tyson Fury from the sport, but you can only beat who's in front of you, and AJ did just that with utter ease. Martin came to the fight full of confidence, probably a little too confident.
I walk this earth like a god.
And in round 1, Martin was very cautious and had very little output. Joshua was applying pressure with probing jabs with right hands, pushing Martin back to the ropes and keeping him out of range. In round 2, AJ would put Martin down, slipping his jab and countering him with a straight right hand. Another right hand would shortly follow, putting Martin on his arse, which made him smile in embarrassment, and the fight would be stopped. In only his 16th fight, AJ has become the IBF heavyweight champion of the world, and he did it without breaking a sweat, showing fantastic timing and power to dispatch of Martin. AJ would make his first world title defense against unbeaten American contender Dominic Breazeale. Breazeale was very limited, offering very little for the 7 rounds of the fight, but what he did show was a lot of heart. He was ultimately target practice for AJ, too slow and unable to slip out of range. In round 7, AJ would send Breazeale to the canvas, showcasing his fantastic combination punching. Breazeale would bravely get to his feet, but it would be short-lived as AJ sent him down once again following a barrage of punches, making his first successful defense of his world title. His next title defense would come against American contender Eric Molina. Really not much to say on this one. Molina was absolutely abysmal to say the least. He showed a lack of ambition with very little will to win the fight. Molina ultimately came to survive and get a payday. It would take just 3 rounds for AJ to dispatch of Molina, not exactly the best preparation for his next fight. Enter Vladimir Klitschko, the former dominant unified world champion coming off a couple years of inactivity following his loss to Tyson Fury in 2015. This was the perfect passing of the torch type fight. You had the fresh new hungry champion in AJ facing off against a legend, a fighter that no doubt AJ admired as he rose through the ranks. Some thought the fight came too early in AJ's career, and there was no doubt that AJ was still very raw, but ultimately, once you become world champion, there's no going backwards. AJ and Vlad would throw down in front of 90,000 people in Wembley. The era of AJ coming up the ranks was just such a great and exciting period for British boxing. I mean, we had Matchroom and Sky putting on great pay-per-view fights. Obviously, Carl Froch and George Groves also have their part to play, but it was mainly AJ who was flying the flag during the resurgence of big-time boxing in Britain. The fight would be an all-time classic, with drama throughout, with both men exchanging knockdowns and coming through adversity, all commented on by the great voice of Adam Smith to add extra drama. In the early rounds, Vlad had success keeping AJ at range and landing probing jabs. The fight would spark in round 5, where Joshua unloaded with heavy shots, putting Klitschko onto the canvas, but Vladimir recovered well, and in round 6, Klitschko landed a huge right hand, which troubled AJ, and showed that Vladimir Klitschko was far from out. Joshua was put down by a gigantic shot from Vlad. He was exhausted but managed to get through it and recover. And in round 11, Joshua would unleash a barrage of punches, including a huge uppercut, which would ultimately overwhelm the veteran, and the referee would stop the fight. Both men showed real adversity throughout the fight, and Vladimir Klitschko showed that he still had something to offer. AJ would get a 10th round stoppage win against veteran Carlos Takam before facing then WBO champion New Zealander Joseph Parker. Now, this fight was a hard watch to say the least, going the full 12 rounds. Joseph Parker is a high quality boxer. He used his solid footwork, creating angles, and was able to close the distance and land some solid body shots against AJ. The fight really wouldn't take off due to the referee utterly determined to ruin it, breaking up the fight at every chance he could get, not wanting to see either man get any success. Despite the slick boxing of Parker, AJ showcased a very mature boxing performance, using his jab effectively, and I felt he was comfortable throughout the fight. AJ would be the clear winner, winning by unanimous decision. However, the scorecards were too wide in my opinion, and it was a shame that due to the referee, neither fighter was really able to build much momentum. At the back end of the year, AJ would defend his belts against dangerous Russian challenger Alexander Povetkin, who, shameless plug, I've made a similar video on him going over his career, so if you're interested, go watch that. Povetkin presented a huge threat. With a world-class left hook and bags of experience, despite his age, he was still very sharp and had plenty of success in this fight. Joshua was using his jab to maintain the distance, but the craftiness of Povetkin allowed him to land some effective shots, and that world-class left hook that I mentioned earlier would pose a constant threat throughout the fight. He would land plenty of clean shots. Povetkin was making this a very competitive fight, with some giving him all the rounds prior to the stoppage, which came in round 7. Joshua unleashed a powerful combination which wobbled Povetkin, and he eventually put him down with a huge right hand. Povetkin would manage to get up, but the fight wouldn't last much longer, as AJ smelt blood and put Povetkin down once again, getting the KO and defending his unified world heavyweight titles. This was a solid win considering the ability of Povetkin. However, AJ showed vulnerability in this fight, and speaking of showing vulnerability, let's discuss AJ's American debut because oh dear me. In 2019, AJ would make his long-awaited debut across the pond. After becoming a superstar in the UK, it would be finally time for AJ to try capture the North American market. The opponent AJ and his team went for was Jarrell Big Baby Miller, or as we know him as Big Pharmacy Miller. Miller would of course test positive for being a dirty drug cheat, and the course of AJ's career would massively change, as we all know. There were rumours of multiple fighters replacing Miller for AJ's American debut, however, to the casual fans' amusement, Mexican fighter Andy Ruiz would step up on short notice, a man who, let's be honest, made a lot of men around the world feel good about themselves. Standing next to AJ, who was built like a Spartan, it was always going to look amusing, but if ever there was a fight that shows that muscles do not win fights, this is it. AJ, looking to impress at the most iconic boxing arena, Madison Square Garden, he looked visibly nervous during the ring walk and at the start of the fight, starting rather tentatively. It wouldn't be until the third round where all hell broke loose. AJ sat Ruiz down with a beautiful left hook. Although a big shot, Ruiz wasn't in serious pain and was able to quickly recover. AJ would land another huge right hand shortly after, which Ruiz just ate with ease. And it was with this flurry of punches from AJ where he would get himself into massive trouble. Misjudging how hurt Ruiz actually was, he would become reckless, and the last thing you want to do is to exchange with Ruiz on the inside. But AJ would do just that, and would end up getting caught with a left hook to the side of the head, which scrambled the head of AJ, and Ruiz would eventually send him down to the canvas. Ruiz wouldn't allow AJ to recover, swarming him with his extremely fast hands, which was causing AJ all types of trouble. He was able to cut the distance off much more easily, as AJ stopped being able to keep him at bay with his jab. Ruiz sent him crashing to the canvas once again, and this was becoming a complete beatdown. AJ somehow got through round 3, and was basically in recovery mode for the rest of the fight. Ruiz became much more patient in the later rounds, and in round 7 it would pay off as Ruiz knocked AJ down for the third time after another flurry of punches, and it wouldn't take long for Ruiz to drop him again, with the referee calling it off, which was ultimately the correct decision. A nightmare defeat for AJ, the lasting scars from this fight cannot be underestimated. When you have fights like that, a piece of you is left in the ring, and AJ would certainly lose a lot of confidence from this fight. The moral of the story here is to never write off the unknown Mexican. We would of course get to see this fight again at the back end of the year, with AJ getting the opportunity to become a 2-time unified champion and show he's still firmly one of the best in the division. As criticism was at an all-time high for AJ, he really needed a convincing performance. Now AJ and Ruiz went in totally different directions in the lead up to this fight. Ruiz, after changing his life in New York, becoming a world champion and making life-changing money, would lose the discipline that managed to get him to this stage in the first place. Eating poorly and training incorrectly, he came into the fight like an absolute mess. In contrast, AJ would learn from his errors and adapt, coming in at a more solid weight, not looking like a bodybuilder, but rather a boxer. Ruiz, with all the excess weight, would look sluggish in the fight, being too slow on his feet and unable to cut the distance like he did in the first fight. AJ would absolutely school Ruiz. He would keep him at range, not overly getting involved when he was on the inside, having little moments here and there, which was his mistake obviously in the first fight, too willing to exchange. Ruiz showcased his very limited head movement and was getting his head jabbed off repeatedly. After a very professional performance from AJ, he would win by unanimous decision and become, of course, a two-time unified world champion. AJ's next fight would be against Bulgarian heavyweight Kubrat Pulev. The two were actually meant to meet years prior, however Pulev suffered an injury. I was actually in attendance for this fight and it was just bizarre to say the least. With only 1,000 fans in the arena, I don't think you could ever see the heavyweight champion of the world in a more up-close way than that. AJ would simply outclass Pulev, putting Pulev down twice in round 3, and then in round 9 he would hit Pulev with a bunch of uppercuts which sent Pulev crashing to the canvas, with AJ finishing him off for good with a right hand. AJ would then call out Tyson Fury in his post-fight speech, and it looked like the fight was going to happen. However, a judge ruled that Deontay Wilder was entitled to a third fight, and the two fighters would go their separate ways. Instead, AJ would have to fight former undisputed cruiserweight champion Alexander Usyk, who was mandatory for the WBO strap. Usyk would put on a masterclass of a performance in Tottenham. The fight was very one-sided in my opinion. Many dismissed Usyk's chances of beating AJ due to the size difference, but boxing isn't that simple. If size was the only factor in winning fights, Nikolai Valuev would be the greatest heavyweight of all time. AJ looked way too upright and stiff during the fight, a common criticism that has been labelled at AJ throughout his career, and it was very present in this fight. Usyk didn't allow AJ to set with his right hand, constantly making him miss and making AJ second guess himself. The fight would come to a dramatic end in round 12 where Usyk showed tremendous combination punching, pushing AJ back to the ropes and almost knocking him out. Usyk showed why you can never write off cruiserweights coming up to heavyweight. Size and power is not the be-all and end-all in boxing, and that styles do make fights. The rematch would take place in Saudi Arabia. AJ would make a big change in his camp, replacing longtime trainer Robert McCracken in favour of world-class trainer Robert Garcia, and I thought the link-up worked out well for AJ. Like I said in my Usyk video, AJ was a million times better than he was in the first fight. And I think actually this fight aged even better after the recent undisputed fight between Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk. AJ gave absolutely everything in this fight. He managed to keep up a solid pace throughout the fight, something hard to do when facing someone like Usyk who has a tremendous gas tank. AJ came into the fight with a much better mentality, throwing solid jabs and showcasing good counter-punching with his right hand. But ultimately, Usyk is just a better fighter, and there's no shame in that. I felt Usyk was near enough the same as he was in the first fight, but AJ did show massive improvements, and despite the scorecards being very similar to the first fight, I thought AJ was much better. Usyk would win for the second time, and after putting everything into this fight, AJ struggled to accept defeat, picking up the microphone and going on a sporadic rant. Clearly, he put everything mentally and physically into this fight, and to not win must have been very demoralising. With no more titles, meaning no more mandatories or a potential undisputed fight with Fury, it was unclear who AJ would face next. It certainly wouldn't be a huge stadium fight for a while, as AJ needed to rebuild his career. For his next fight, AJ would be heading back to his old stomping ground, the O2 Arena, the same place he became world champion. AJ would once again change his trainer, something I wasn't a fan of considering I thought Garcia was improving AJ when they were together. But he decided to go with American trainer Derek James, trainer of Errol Spence. His opponent for his comeback would be rising American contender Jermaine Franklin, who was coming off a close fight against AJ's old rival Dylan White, where many thought Franklin won the fight. The fight would be a worrying one for many AJ fans, as it looked like AJ's confidence was shot to pieces. He was very cautious, overly clinching with Franklin, but despite that he used his jab and right hand effectively to win a comfortable unanimous decision. Many dismissed AJ after this performance, saying he has lost his edge, and some even saying he should just retire due to his heart seemingly no longer in the game. I personally was skeptical as well whether AJ was mentally defeated following the two demoralising defeats against Usyk. AJ's next fight on the comeback trail would be against the Nordic nightmare Robert Helenius. The cautious and tentativeness would be on show again from AJ. Helenius, I felt, performed well for a man who took the fight on such short notice. After just being in a fight himself a week prior, he deserves a hell of a lot of respect for that. Boos were yelled out from the crowd as fans were disappointed to see yet again another cautious performance from AJ. However, in round 7, that would all change as AJ landed a huge right hand, knocking Helenius out stiff, a knockout that AJ very much needed to rebuild his confidence. AJ would keep up his activity, having one more fight before the end of the year on a huge heavyweight themed Saudi card. And the man put in front of him was a very credible name, Swedish southpaw Otto Wallin, the man who famously gave Tyson Fury a very tough fight in 2019. And a man very familiar to AJ, as they've shared many rounds back in the amateur days and also shared sparring sessions together. AJ also changed his trainer for the millionth time, now working with the very talented British trainer Ben Davison. AJ made it look very easy. Wallin's corner team called the fight off in round 5 after a beating from AJ. In the aftermath of the fight, a lot of comparisons were made with how Tyson Fury dealt with Wallin, which was a more competitive fight going all 12 rounds. This win, I felt, really regained a lot of fan interest in AJ that had been lost due to past performances, and put him right back in the picture at the top of the division. It wouldn't be Deontay Wilder next for AJ as many were hoping, as Wilder would get comfortably beat by Joseph Parker in his fight. Around this time, MMA world champion Francis Ngannou made his debut, and AJ would do what Fury should have done, dropping Ngannou early with a right hand in the first round, and dropped him twice in round 2, with the second being a devastating right hand that put Ngannou's lights out. Yes, Joshua is the former world champion boxer here, but nobody in Ngannou's fighting career has put him out like that. What I liked about AJ after the fight was his demeanour. He didn't really celebrate, he knew that was what he was meant to do, and he handled the fight like a true professional. After 2 back-to-back defeats against Alexander Usyk, AJ has managed to rebuild his career and put himself back on track to becoming a 3-time world champion. Recently, the IBF belt held by Usyk became vacant, and Dubois was elevated to full fake championship status. Shortly after, it was announced that AJ would be taking him on at Wembley Stadium in September. Now, as AJ is still obviously fighting, as I'm sure many will probably tell me, I will be doing an updated video on this later down the line when he's retired from the sport. But let's assess his career as of right now. At the age of 34, becoming a 2-time unified world champion, beating most challengers put in front of him, AJ has had a solid career thus far. Only 3 defeats, with one of the defeats avenged when he comfortably defeated Ruiz in the rematch, and of course losing twice to an all-time great in Usyk, which is absolutely no disgrace. What I like about AJ the most is he takes on credible names. He won belts from the likes of Joseph Parker and Vladimir Klitschko, and then he defends them against Povetkin, Pulev and Andy Ruiz. He comfortably is one of the best of his generation, a freak athlete with tremendous combination punching, strong, powerful and has a solid jab. I'm not telling any secrets when I say he's a fantastic heavyweight. And I think when he retires, he will get the respect he deserves from fans, as I believe even right now he's underrated by many, with some lazy comparisons to fellow British heavyweights such as Frank Bruno and even Audley Harrison early on in his career. I think many misjudge AJ. So far in AJ's career, these are his top 4 wins in my opinion, with Vladimir Klitschko being the absolute standout. Overall, AJ's resume is solid, but there is arguments to say that he hasn't got a truly outstanding victory like a Alexander Usyk for example, or a Tyson Fury. But let me know what you think AJ's top 4 wins are in his career, what do you make of him as a fighter, his resume, and most importantly, how do you see the fight going with Dubois?